Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Eternal J YouTube channel. It's been a hot minute, and for that I do apologize. There hasn't been much content to make with all the busy schedule in the world of the esports casting stuff, but I'm back, and I've got something very special for you that I hope you will find very interesting. The Pinnacle Cup is set to return on the 28th of June with its second season of the year, and I'm excited to announce that I will be one of the casters for the event. And I've also teamed up with Pinnacle and the media partner GosuGamers to bring you some very special professional tips and tricks to help improve your game in Counter-Strike. Today I'm going to be talking you through my warm-up routine, which is usually done before I enter matchmaking or pug matches. Now this routine has gotten more complex as the years have gone on. I remember picking up Global Offensive initially, and everyone was just kind of like, hey, play this little aim training map or just do some deathmatch and you'll kind of basically be sorted. But I guess as the professional scene has gotten more prominent and as the game overall has seen the player base increase in its general skill level, it has become a bit more of an effort, I guess you could say, to get warmed up overall. And definitely my personal routine has gone from just an aim training map to now doing a few more things along the way. Now, most warm-up routines are pretty much tailored to the individual players, and I will say that certainly for some people, maybe all of these steps might require more steps, or you could just isolate one of these individual things that I do to be able to sort yourself out for your own game. So, whilst this might be the best way for me to warm up personally, for you, it might be just more of a starting off point. So, first thing I'm going to say is just experiment, try some new things. If something doesn't start working or it stops working, then just try something different, add some things, change some things, make some subtractions. It depends really all on the individual player. So, it's definitely not going to be something that will absolutely improve your game, but like I said before, it might be something that you start with. So with that said, I have a three-step process as to how I warm up before going into any particular matchup. And the first thing I do is I train my aim. The second thing I do is I train my kills, and then the third thing I do is train my decision making. So with those individual steps isolated from each other, they combine as time goes on, and eventually I get myself into a position where I'm actually particularly decent as a player. So let's talk to it bit by bit here. So the first thing I do is I train my aim, and this is one of the most basic things that I first learned how to do when I started picking up and getting seriously into the professional scene and matchmaking as a whole. One of the things that was always recommended to me by everyone I watched was to play training_aim_CSGO, which is the map that I've used for years. I know that there are newer maps out there, but for me, I'm a bit of an old-fashioned kind of guy when it comes to the way I do things. When I discover something and I set myself in those ways, I sort of stick to them, and it works for me in the best sort of way possible. So the first thing I'll do is grab an AK, because I'm a rifler, and then I'll go back one level, so I'm sort of like a bit of a medium distance away from the target. So usually at close ranges, I can tend to do pretty well when it comes to dealing with threats up close, but medium ranges is where I find most of my fights come down to. So I try and get back one level and I sort of fight from that position and try and focus on my aim from that kind of a distance. So once I've got my appropriate distance, I then start focusing on getting the targets to fall. Now we start with the biggest sizes, usually the default sizes, where my starting point is, and then as I go throughout, I'll try to see if I can get consistent at hitting those targets nice and effectively. Mostly on the one-tap scenario, it's all about reaction timings and crosshair adjustment. And then once I get good and once I feel like I'm comfortable with hitting those targets and not hitting every single one, but being consistent when it comes to just generally reacting to the targets themselves, I'll make the targets smaller, and then we'll keep going and make them smaller and smaller until we get to headshot lines. And once those basic shots are down, that's when it's going to be like, okay, well, now we've definitely sorted here. Like, I don't have any doubts in terms of what my skill ceiling is. I don't have any doubts in terms of what my hand can do and how I'm going to place my mouse and my crosshair. So that's the first step, really, is just get that little mechanical skill down. And the second thing is applying that mechanical skill to the kills, and that's where training my kills comes in. Jump into a deathmatch server, usually a private DM server, one that's relatively well known as backed up by anti-cheat. Depending on your skill level, the Valve deathmatch servers could be alright. I know that when I was starting, that's what I used to do. The deathmatch servers in private servers can be a little bit harsh, depending on how far you go. So again, experiment with things. If you find that you're getting it a bit too easy on the Valve deathmatch servers, then you might want to graduate into using the server browser and going on there. Again, the main focus is just to experiment right there. What you want to do is try and focus on different types of kills. It's something I picked up from Hiko, actually. You want to try focus on, as a rifler for myself personally, I focus on trying to get sprays, trying to get burst fires, and trying to get taps. So I'll do one set of one type of kill. So for example, I might do 100 spray kills in one session. Then I'll go to 75 taps, and then maybe back to 100 bursts, essentially, because those are the main ways that I'm going to get kills as a rifler. With an AWP, it might be different. In particular, you want to focus on getting the long range frags and try to see how you can focus on getting that block. block and exclusively focus on that, and then just move on to another type of frag depending on what your role is in the team. And again, what I'm focusing on is consistency. And what I want to try and do is when I get into a scenario where I'm taking those fights, I'll be able to win the fight more times than not when I'm at 100 HP. So once you can get to that point, then that's when you can move on to step number 3, which is to train your decision making. Now, it's all well and good trying to train your crosshair placement and your reaction timings to be able to focus on getting the kills, but that's only going to be so good when you have all these types of kills at your disposal. And it's the question now of how do you use the sprays, how do you use the taps, how do you use the bursts, and that's where I like to look into a 1v1 arena server and try and focus on trying to win the fights when it comes to individual players. When you're up against a human who's also taking it seriously, that's where you can focus up and really say, right, okay, now is where I take everything I've just practiced and I try and apply it to a relatively real-world situation. It's not like it's 100% in terms of a matchup, but when you come down to a 1v1 arena, the main skills you're training is focusing on situation assessment. You look at the situation, you think, okay, what's going to be the perfect way to get the kill on this guy? Do I want to go for taps? Do I want to try and burst fire? Am I going to get right up close and personal and spray through? Maybe he might catch me off guard. Okay, then how am I going to deal with that? Am I going to wildly spray? Am I going to burst fire? Is he a big enough threat to the point where I might get to, is he going to be a big enough threat where I have to panic? You know, those are the things you're going to ask yourself when it comes to 1v1 arenas, and you'll be able to apply the kills that you've just been able to get in deathmatch into a real world scenario. The other thing I also do in this situation is I also force specific circumstances. The 1v1 servers that I play on, they give you the option to set up matches where you're forced to use certain weapons. You're forced to use an M4 or an AK or an AWP in particular. That third one is the thing that I focus on the most because I'm not an AWP player. But I find myself in situations sometimes where it's like, okay, I'm in a 1v4 scenario and I've got to save. And what's the thing I do? I look for the AWP first and foremost, get it into the next round to give it off to my AWPer so he can start to perform with that weapon instead. And because I'm not an AWPer, that causes a problem in which I'm not very good with the AWP. So with the 1v1 arenas, what it can do is to force me to use the AWP so I can try and focus on just getting kills, not necessarily trying to focus on trying to win with the AWP and play it as a role, but just to be able to stay alive in the event I'm getting hunted in that 1v4 scenario, for instance. But again, the focus is all about decision making there. It's all about whether or not I can consistently make the right calls at the right times. And once I am making those right calls at the right time, that's where I think the warm-up routine is complete. So you train your aim, you focus on your mechanical skill and how to move your crosshair and focus on targets individually. Then you train your kills, each individual type of kill, and you train your decision making to make sure you're making the right calls at the right moments in the right places. So I hope this video has helped you out a little bit. Maybe you thought about your warm-up routine in a bit of a different way compared to my personal thoughts on it. Maybe you've got yourself a decent warm-up routine now for yourself to start at. I mean, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below, and I'm looking forward to seeing you out there on the server. I'm also looking forward to seeing you during the Pinnacle Cup, which of course starts on the 28th of June. But here on the channel in a few days' time, I've got a few more videos lined up in association with the Pinnacle Cup. The next video will be a professional breakdown of my own personal gameplay, so I can teach you what to do and what not to do in certain contexts. I've got a very little spicy idea for how that's going to go down, so make sure you're subscribed, hit the notification bell, and tune back in very, very soon for even more pro tips in CSGO.